similar approach as the regs, the larger PRA. The CPRA includes with under Gov Code 6254F3, which acknowledges that there is very specific personally identifiable information that can be released specifically if it's for scholarly, journalistic, political, or government purposes, and that disclosure does not actually include the release of any personally identifying information. So it's released to entities that are going to be doing analyses of the data, but not to release the data. And I think including kind of a similar carve out for just all of this confidentially personally identifiable information explicitly in the regs, I think would be a way to resolve current conflict that exists with kind of what the DOJ should do when it has information that the agency has provided that it shouldn't have provided, and it has requesters seeking that information that they can't meaningfully like redact out or address in that kind of way. So I think that might be a way to address kind of all of these concerns, is that it's not going to be released in any manner that can actually identify the individual, but it allows for entities to do the meaningful, necessary public policy research that this, data collection effort is for.
I think it's data that we need to collect, should be collected, and absolutely have to collect if we're talking about reforms and moving forward reforms, improving policing, and getting to the heart of why. I think the race of the people involved is critical.
I agree.
All right, so thank you for that. Any additional comments?
Are we going on to the regs or just additional comments in the template?
Additional comments, let's go first in the template. There was something that I omitted in the very beginning in my facilitation of this. I forgot one of the things I wanted to add in, and that was at the very top when it talks about a person stopped or type of stop, vehicle, etc. Now that we understand how we are benchmarking our data and using the American Community Survey, I think it's critical that officers, deputies are able to identify if the person stopped is a member of the local jurisdiction. And I say that because if we're benchmarking demographic data against the American Community Survey and using the percentage of people who are stopped by breaking that down by ethnicity or race, we should be able to do an apples to apples comparison as to the race, ethnicity of that local jurisdiction. So I advocate that we add a checkbox field that yes or no is the person stopped a resident of the local jurisdiction.
That's something you need a motion for, or is that just something that gets suggested and then?
I'm just going to suggest it. We'll put it in the list and we'll vote on it shortly. Or maybe not shortly. We'll vote on it soon.
And just a question in terms of how that would be captured, because I know people may not know exactly the jurisdiction per se. Is that something that would be like LA City, LA County? They're not exactly the same. Like if you're an unincorporated area, like for me, for example, I know personally. So like just question in terms of how that, because all of these other things are just things that are identified by the officer without having to get any input from the individual. So like how would that actually be collected?
It would likely be on the person's stop driver's license or other form of identification. And if they were, say, I'm the Pleasanton police chief, if someone were stopped, if they're a resident of Pleasanton, I would check no. If they're not a resident of Pleasanton, if they're a resident of Pleasanton, I would check yes. If they're not a resident of Pleasanton, I would check no. If they're out in the county, I would suggest that if they're a county resident of the county, in your LA, Alameda, etc., that it would be a yes or no based on their county of residence.
Can you explain what the relevance of the residency is in terms of collecting this data?
Sure. One of the ways that we benchmark our data in the annual report is by using the American Community Survey. The American Community Survey, it sounds like you're familiar with it. So in order to, as we evaluate those stopped by peace officers, I think it's important to be able to evaluate the local data against the local demographic population makeup, as opposed to the larger universe. So for example, some cities have a draw of tourism or a draw for retail or employment, etc. And their daytime or nighttime population is different than their local community population in terms of demographics. And so it's important for us to be able to compare, since we're using the ACS data, to compare similar data sets.
I would wonder for CHP, is this something that we would be exempt from? Because being a statewide agency, I could see kind of issues for us with trying to determine that. I mean, having jurisdiction over all the freeways where people are traveling, visiting, and all those things, that would be very difficult.
Correct. I don't know that it's as applicable to the CHP because of the transitory nature and patrolling our freeways and unincorporated areas and roadways. So I agree. I don't necessarily see as being as relevant to CHP.
I guess my question would be, what do you glean from the data if it were to show a high number of non-residents versus residents, or a low number of non-residents versus residents? What does that data tell you that is important for our purposes?
I see it more from what it tells us by looking at the resident population data. And what does it tell us from that? Just trying to create two similar data sets.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm not sure if it's relevant whether they live there or not. I get that we're trying to compare apples to apples, right? So ACS residency versus the population that comes into contact with the police. But I can't help but think that for researchers who wanted to understand that there would be other ways to assess that in the aggregate, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that would happen. That's what I'm.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm aware of research of, the demographics of the working population or of the tourist population. So to the extent that a city's population would be heavily skewed by a particular industry, that a researcher could come in and assess, whether that's something to take into account. That's not relevant to the actual individual stop, but at that point, I'm not sure. I guess I'm concerned about drawing some inferences from that without then also adding in some additional data about what those demographics are for the populations that are drawn into the city for employment or other sectors or other industries.
And I wanted to add, sorry for interrupting. I wanted to add that while I understand there is reliance on the American Community Survey, it is in fact just a survey, and it is, unlike the census, an actual count of individuals. My organization actually ran the census outreach work for LA County for all AAPIs. And I can tell you that we have had for many years concerns about the inaccuracy of the American Community Survey when it comes to populations within the larger Asian American Pacific Islander rubric. Because it's a survey, it doesn't necessarily accurately count individual subgroups within that larger framework.
Member Kokama, you missed that conversation a few meetings ago where we had a very in-depth and robust conversation about how to benchmark our data. And so I appreciate your questions and concerns and information about the American Community Survey. I wasn't aware of that, so I missed you 2 years ago.
Better late than never.
This is Tanya. It's a little bit before 5, and we have our 6 p.m. public hearing, and we have about 45 minutes of other agenda items. So I just wanted to give a heads up to the board about that, in case you wanted to figure out how to wrap up the discussion on the regs.
Yeah, we should probably move on to public comment. Member Ochoa, I know that you had additional information about the text. However, I do think that we need to allow those who are on the line an opportunity to provide input. So unless there's strong opposition, we'll go ahead and open up public comment.
And I can just maybe circle back after public comment because there are two kind of substantial things that I wanted to flag.
Okay. Well, we usually do our public comment by region. And so if you are on the chat and want to raise your hand, we'll start with Southern California. Anyone who would like to comment from Southern California. And I'm going to need some help from DOJ to help. Is there a lot of folks on the call? Let's see who's raising their hand. I see Mr. Hilton.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm going way back to the beginning of the meeting. I heard mention of stops or interactions where there were transit sweeps. It was said that a transit sweep that did not result in an action being taken did not have to be reported. I ask you to reconsider that. Here in San Diego, on the trolley system, it is well documented by data and by anecdote, and we've seen many newspaper articles that deal with it. The police walked past white people and challenged only blacks and Hispanics. Most people have heard about the situation in La Mesa where the officer challenged a black person who was standing outside the trolley system about his presence there. And that officer was fired. I am particularly sensitive towards that. And the key element that should be considered as to whether it is a stop or not is the person being challenged for paying their fare free to walk away from the officer when challenged? If the person is not free to leave, that person is detained, and it needs to be recorded. I move on to the community caretaking discussion. And I like much of what I see happening, but to bring it full circle, we must have the California Department of Justice remove, rescind, invalidate its directive to officers when they are performing community caretaking functions. Here is what the CADOJ says. In community caretaking situations where none of the other data values are available, officers may select the following: reason for stop, reasonable suspicion that person was engaged in criminal activity. Offense code, community caretaking as is assigned by CGIS, which is number 99990. And the last, other reasonable suspicion of crime. All that says is that the homeless person is involved in criminal activity. That needs to go, and it needs to go immediately. And I think that's all. I don't remember anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a hand up from Naomi Waters.
Chief Swing, if I could just jump in real quick and I just want to make very clear for the public that this public comment period is to give recommendations to the board, and that this is not being considered public comment for purposes of the DOJ regulations. That meeting is set to start at 6 o'clock. So I just want to make sure that the public is aware that if you make a comment during this public comment period for the board, it is not going to be put in the official DOJ record.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Hi, thank you for that as well. Sorry, I'm Naomi Waters. I'm a student at UC Riverside. I represent the UC Student Association. I thank you all for opening up that space for us. But I'd like to implore the board to include UC, the UC Office of the President in these conversations, or have students as active observers in these conversations, right? So the UC has now broadening up its safety initiatives and will be including RIPA specifically in its university practices. And I've heard a lot of things that bring up much concern in me, specifically as a student as we're returning back to campus in fall. And I don't know if this is particularly the avenue to talk about this, or perhaps maybe in the next hour or so I should break up these concerns, but I thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who would like to speak? I see Mike Morper.
Hi, I've got a little different perspective to offer. I work for an organization that provides a RIPA solution for LEAs in the state. We have a significant amount of interaction with many of the agencies, and I just wanted to share a couple of observational things that we've learned as we're helping a lot of the Wave 4 agencies go live. We are finding that about 85% of the reports are probably going to be produced on mobile devices. So the data collection is going to be done on an iPhone or an Android device. Please be thoughtful about the required language that you absolutely want to have included for the officers to be evaluating as they're trying to tick boxes on an iPhone. So we all have a pretty good idea of what that experience is like. That's data point one. Data point two, back to the student that just spoke. I suspect the law enforcement professionals that are a part of the board may have already done this, but RIPA stop data collection up to this point has not included any of the state universities. I would encourage you to reach out to your colleagues that are those chiefs that do have that responsibility for those campuses. They are consistently coming up with some very valid concerns or recommendations for data to be collected that's really unique to their environment. So I think that would be a great suggestion for you to give consideration to. Last and absolutely least, the suggestion of splitting what is currently 15A in the document into two lists from a human factors standpoint is a really good idea. It's going to minimize some of the cognitive friction that the officer needs to endure as he or she is trying to evaluate what data to collect so that they can focus on one topic at a time. There's really two different topics that are kind of conflated together into that list, and some of your conversation earlier this evening covered that. So I think that's a great suggestion, and again, will help to be able to expedite accurate data entry. Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you for your comments. I don't see any other hands raised. Are there any other members of the public who wanted to speak to the board about the regulations and provide their insights and input into or their perspective on that? Again, there will be an opportunity at 6 o'clock to provide your input under public comment to DOJ. So this is just to the board. Okay.
I
hearing
did.
Yep.
I did. I'm sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand. Sorry, I'm kind of new to Blue Jeans. My name is Lou Vitek. I also work with a vendor who provides a solution for agencies to collect the RIPA data. I had a few comments. One was on the officer ID and the consideration of having that follow the officer from agency to agency. If that's a serious consideration, then that means that the DOJ is going to have to assign that per officer so that vendors like us can carry that value around from agency to agency, or at least the agency will have to know to tell us when they register that user in our system. Just a note. I had a question about the LGBT, since it's just a 2 yes or no question today, whether somebody's LGBT or not, and now you're expanding it to LGBT versus straight heterosexual. I had a question about whether no means straight or heterosexual, no as it's presented today. And the use of force conversation, separating those categories out. It does group, you could group those today by those, but it's not reducing the list. I heard some talk about trying to reduce the list, but this doesn't reduce the list at all. It just groups them. And you could, of course, report on those today, regardless of whether they're grouped or not, because you know which reasons for the stop, or sorry, actions taken are considered use of force. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who wish to address the RIPA board? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment and open it up for voting on any recommendations. I know, Member Ochoa, you had a couple of things you wanted to bring up before we did that, so I'll open the floor for you.
Just two, which should be relatively short. Just there's a change in the definition of stop duration to say that the stop is ended when the individual is actually booked in the station. And based on a statement of reasons, that was to kind of clarify when it should end. I think it's good to provide clear boundaries on when the stop ends, but I think that would potentially skew data significantly based on like how far from the station someone was initially stopped, or what other individuals have to be booked before getting to this individual. And so I think a better kind of stop point should be removal from the scene as the end of the stop. Also, because some stops can terminate without an individual being booked, they could terminate the individual being taken into a hospital, for instance, if after use of force or some other way. So I think removal from the scene might be a better stop point and make more uniform collection of data based on kind of how an individual is treated by an officer and not impacted by so many things out of their control. And then the other was actually raised by a member of the public, and that's the exclusion of transit sweeps from the need to collect the stop data. The decisions to conduct transit sweeps can be deeply determined by identity, and I think excluding those, particularly when we see such disparity already in transit stops, is not a good idea, and it would exclude a lot of very important information from the RIPA data collection. So I would suggest no longer including that as one of the categories of information that's excluded from the RIPA fields.
Any other discussion? Actually, now we're on to voting. Any discussion before we take a vote about the things we've discussed previously?
Chief Swing, this is Tanya. If it works for you, I can. Sorry, Board Member Raphael, if you want to talk.
Oh, I just wanted to also echo the concern about the transit stops. I'm not sure why. I imagine that for some agencies, that would be the majority of the stopping they're doing. And I want, I'm perhaps that is something that we want to reconsider.
Yeah, the challenge with transit police is that, or they're not police, right? And I think the fix for them is the need to address them is much larger. They need to actually be considered public safety officers under state law, but they're not right now. So they're excluded from all of the standards and requirements that that other law enforcement have to abide by.
Would that be true also for BART police as well, or is it? Oh, it is.
Yeah. So it's a problem throughout the state. To the extent that the regulations that through regulation we can have RIPA apply to them, that would be really important. I think there's a larger need for a legislative fix to be considered to pull them in to public safety officers for all the other reasons that we need to maintain standards in the profession.
Just to flag though, like in Los Angeles, county police departments do the transit. So if they're already, this would only, the exclusion here would only prevent agencies that do have to collect data from collecting that data, right? So that's the only application. So it already should apply to them, and this is giving them a carve out. So in jurisdictions where they do have to collect it, this would no longer apply.
Right. This would make sure that they are have to abide by regardless of whether they're run by police or their own entities. But in state law, transit officers are not public safety officers unless they are divisions of the police department.
And can you take staff away a little bit on this topic?
Sorry, Chief, you kind of cut out. I'm not sure what you were asking.
Yeah, I'm getting an echo. I'm not sure why that happens sometimes. There's a conversation about transit sweeps and either their inclusion or exclusion. And I'm just looking for the rationale or the thought process behind excluding transit sweeps from RIPA stop data collection information. My understanding is that, say, BART police as an example, they are peace officers and they fall under the authority of a peace officer. I don't know why they would be excluded from having to submit RIPA data as other officers do.
Yeah, that's not quite the issue. So it's not whether or not they're a peace officer or not, it's whether or not they were making stops. And so I believe, and I think Tanya can speak to this as well, is that we are seeking, and this has been the general overall tenor of the regulations, is that if there are sort of activity that is just simply checking to see if people have tickets without particularized suspicion, then we have not been collecting that data. It's just kind of like the metal detector searches. So those are technically searches, but because there's no individualized suspicion. Tanya, do you want to expand upon that?
Sure. So I think the issue is if we were to require officers to report every time they check someone's fare, it would just sort of inundate the system. So what we were trying to do is narrow it down so that anytime an officer is, say, doing some sort of check of fares, that they would only report a stop data entry if they took any sort of action towards that person, or if they were detaining that person for some sort of individualized suspicion. Anytime that the officer is just checking to see if the person paid their fare or not, they wouldn't be required to include a stop data entry. The concern is just balancing, the officer's time as well as the amount of data that we are getting. And in terms of, furthering the board's interest in racial identity profiling, there was a concern that if it's just a blanket policy that you check everybody's fare, that it wouldn't add to that data analysis. And while I have the floor, it's 5:13, so we do have about half an hour more of the agenda. And then we do have the the public hearing at 6 p.m. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I also have been collecting all of the suggested proposals that the board has made, and I can share that on my screen so you can take a look at it before the board votes on those proposals.
That sounds like a great proposal.
Okay.
To share your screen and then for the board to vote on whether to include those in our recommendations or not.
Great. As you'll see, I kind of divided it up into 4 categories. There were several things that the board board members wanted to affirm existing proposals. There were suggestions to add new data elements, to revise data elements and data values, and remove or revise proposed data elements. I highlighted 2 that I thought were the source of more discussion, so that maybe if the board wanted to consider zeroing in on those. The other ones that weren't highlighted, it seemed like seemed to at least be consensus by silence, but that's the only reason I highlighted it. And let me know if you want me to scroll through this more slowly or direct me to a specific category.
Well, thank you for capturing that information from the notes I have, as well as my memory, that it's all-encompassing. I think we can probably vote on the things that are where there's more consent amongst the board. And maybe if we do it by group, for example, affirm existing proposals and then the revised data elements, et cetera, it'll provide us an opportunity to look at each section in totality before we vote. Even better. So with that, is it better to do a roll call vote, or how would DOJ, how would you like us to accomplish the voting process?
Nancy and Allison, I defer to you about whether a roll call or vote makes sense here.
Yeah, if somebody could make a motion and then second it, and we would need to do just a voice check and have everyone's vote.
Okay.
And go through.
Can I make a motion to affirm all the affirming existing the points 1 through 4 at the very top?
I second that motion.
It is a motion and a second to affirm the existing proposals. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Sorry. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, so that passes unanimously. Can we scroll down to the next larger section, revised data elements, and then we'll come back to the add new elements section?
This is Melanie, can you just change the proposal that, if you scroll down just a little bit on the K9 one, just that it should encompass, so it says consider wordsmithing existing proposal to make clear that it encompasses K9 to apprehend and gain compliance. I think the point is that it's just the display, also not the release, if that makes sense. Is there something else to capture in that?
Then also, are there items passed?
Board Member Choa, does that cover what you were trying to get at?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
It's as a show of force is the point, rather than the purpose, the ultimate law enforcement purpose, but as a show of force, akin to displaying a weapon.
Can we scroll down to 5678?
East Wing, there was an echo, so I can't hear you.
Okay. I know it. There we go. Can you scroll down to the revised data elements section in totality? Okay, so it's down to 8. Okay, is there a motion to approve the revised data elements and data values section?
I move
I'll
that
make a
we
motion, and just confirming that there's the Terry versus Ohio Frisk Pat search, that's acceptable. I know there was some discussion earlier.
My feeling, and I guess I raised it, was that we didn't have an explicit recommendation yet, but we wanted, as these regulations go on a last review, for DOJ to consider whether labeling as a Terry search inadvertently invites, assuming all frisks and pats are fine because they just fall under this umbrella, or if having that language reminds officers that the search has to rise to a certain legal standard. And I raise it in part because other jurisdictions that have collected frisk or pat search data, I haven't seen it refer to the legal case within the category. But I don't feel as, did you raise this because you had another comment about?
No, I was just going to make the motion, and I didn't know if there was any more discussion on that.
Okay. So I guess I would make the tiny suggestion that Part A says consider removing reference, but that Part B strongly says revise example B. So in other words, I would remove consider from exactly where your cursor is now. Thank you, Tanya, to remove the word consider from that second one, and that is revise example B. Thank you.
Board Member Kajabi, I put in consider for all of these because all of these would be comments to the DOJ as suggested changes to the proposals.
Yeah, I might be overreading into the impact of the language here, but I guess I'm saying that B is, I wanted to flag as a priority relative to the discussion around A, where we don't have a set recommendation. But thank you, Tanya.
Would you prefer then saying strongly consider revising?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so was there a motion?
Yes, I made a motion.
Okay. There's a motion to approve the revised data elements and values section. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is that Dr. Raphael? Any discussion?
Yes. For the record, I just approved number 5. We're still adding the second narrative to it.
Make sure you had an echo.
Yes, can you hear me now? Yes, I'm opposed to number 5 as written, just with considering adding a second narrative field. I just don't think we need a second narrative.
So for that, if this is helpful, I could amend to the extent that they want to include the basis for the course of the welfare stop. I think that should be not in the narrative for the reason for the stop. So I guess it's to defer to the DOJ whether or not they need to capture that information in the first instance. But if it is, I just wanted it to be separate from the stop, reason for stop. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but just to flag.
Board Member Choi, are you saying that the suggestion would be consider creating an optional but separate narrative field under stop made during the course of welfare check, rather than requiring officers to include it as part of a narrative in the reason for stop?
Yeah, I think not including it at all might be preferred to including it in the reason for the stop. So yeah, optional narrative field might be good. I don't know. There was obviously consideration prior to that, which we didn't engage in all. So I don't know if there's a strong reason for including that, but just wanted to flag.
I'm okay with optional.
There's a motion and a second. I think those who made the motion a second, you guys okay with the friendly amendment to optional?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, any other discussion? Go for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye. Can we?
Any opposed? And any abstentions? I went to scroll up on the page, but it's not my page to scroll. Tanya, what is next?
I don't believe the board looked at this one, right? I think we skipped over it.
We did.
Okay. And like I said before, I highlighted the ones that caused more discussion, and what I bolded here is what I thought folks were sort of landing on. But again, that was my interpretation. So.
Okay.
Swing.
So let's take item 1 first. Any additional? Yes.
Great. I just want to make clear, I have a question because I think some of the board members have dropped off. And I just want to double check and make sure that I have everybody if we're doing the votes in this way. So currently I have that are still on the call and still voting are you, Chief Swing, Member Kajabi, Member Woods, Member Kulkarni, Member Vang, Member Guerrero, Member Kennedy, Commissioner Ray, Member Hampton, Member Ochoa, and Sheriff Ayub. Have I missed anybody that is still a board member and on the call? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take item 1 in totality, A, B, and C. Any additional discussion about item 1?
I'd like perhaps a small amendment to B that says, consider adding data values indicating potential or potential precipitating, or let's try to think about that. Consider adding value options under this data element, such as. Maybe if we just add such as. Because clearly I think that needs to be thought through.
Yeah, the list is not exhaustive by any means. I will, since it was my amendment, I'll make a motion to add item 1, A through C.
I will second.
Motion and a second. Any additional discussion or conversation?
I have one question, which I should have asked before. What is the process when we say consider? What would be the next steps in the process?
The next step is that if the board approves, Member Raphael or another designated person will read this into the record under public comment, and those comments will go to the Attorney General, to Attorney Obanta, or is it to the Office of Administrative Law? I saw both of those up there for final consideration and consideration to be added to the regs.
So these comments, like Chief Swing said, would go to the Department of Justice, to our office, and we would consider these comments in addition to any other public comment that we've received. And then from there, modify our proposals as needed. And then we would submit our final proposals to the Office of Administrative Law for approval. And like I mentioned before, if we do make changes to the proposals, we would post them, and then we would have a 15-day commentary period. And this might be a good time to just say quickly, like I said, there is a public hearing at 6 p.m. Co-chair Raphael will be reading the board's comments into the record. But if any board member wants to, they don't have to. Any board members more than welcome to come, and they can make a public comment on their own behalf or on behalf of their organization, separate from the board.
Thank you.
This is Brendan Woods again with regards to comment on these. As I keep reading them over and over again, and I'm slightly concerned as how they are phrased, and I'm wondering if we're rushing this, because we have 4 options here that imply that the person who was the victim of the use of force has done something wrong. And I'm concerned about how that is perceived by the public. I am concerned that this does implicate some sort of fault. I have been maybe slightly persuaded by the value of collecting this. I do feel like it's rushed, and we need to be a little more considerate with regards to how we're doing this. I think this comes out to the way it's phrased right here. It goes to justification for the use of force and also implying blame. And I don't think that's what we need to be doing or should be doing as a board here. Those are my thoughts about it.
I also agree with that. There seems to be kind of a random collection of things currently even identified. Like a foot pursuit is something that's much different than resisting arrest, which can be as little as, someone goes like this, which has happened before, to protect their own self. And I think it's unclear exactly what data is being actually collected by this question, other than the officer's kind of subjective rationale based on what potential options are presented for using a particular force. It doesn't seem to be coherent yet, and I think it's something that needs more discussion. If these are relevant and important data pieces that we need to collect, like if there was a vehicular pursuit, if there was something else, then we should be thinking about how we should collect them instead of just kind of throwing these things on here.
I would be in favor of scrapping B and leaving it open to deliberation on the part of DOJ to consider in the next, and then those are just offered as examples, right? And clearly it's not ready for prime time, so we could just get rid of that and leave A and make C B.
I'll take your friendly amendment. I think it does serve more in-depth review.
Oh, Chief Swing, if you're okay with that amendment, I'll continue my second on your first.
Any additional conversation or discussion?
That the premise still is unclear. For instance, all of the describing the stopped person's actions prior to use of force, that's everything, right? That's the reason why they were stopped in the first instance. It just is unclear exactly what information you're actually trying to obtain in this, that we're even asking the DOJ to come up with a means for tracking.
I agree.
How about consider elements of stop that's precipitated and led to a use of force?
That's actually even stronger in the wrong direction. Precipitated suggests that also necessitated, right? So I would really caution against that language.
We have a motion in a second. I think we're going to have disagreement on this. I think there's a lot of more information to add. This is conceptual at this point. But I think we can take a vote and see where the vote leads us. So if we can get a roll call vote.
Edgar Hampton, aye.
I'm sorry, Chief Swing, are we voting on all three here or just this first one now?
The motion is for number one, A
Number
and
one
B.
only.
Yeah.
Okay.
Melanie Ochoa, nay.
Steve Raphael, aye.
Brendan Woods, nay.
Manju Shekel-Gurney, nay.
Commissioner Ray, aye, except for the narrative field under B.
Bill Ayub, aye.
David Swing, aye.
Lily Kajabi, nay.
Has everyone had a chance to vote?
Andrea Guerrero, nay. I think at this juncture, this warrants more thought.
Chave, nay.
Okay, motion fails.
Yes,
Go ahead, Nancy.
you're correct. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes for yes, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes no. The motion doesn't carry.
Yep. Okay, next is number 1, consider separating out use of force actions. Wait, that was, I'm sorry, Tanya, can you add that section back in just so I can keep track of what we're doing? Thank you. Okay, so this is separating out actions taken for use of force as opposed to searches or others. This is the first item we talked about in our conversation this afternoon. And so, is there a motion on item 2?
Motion to approve item 2.
Okay, is that by Member Woods? I'll second item 2. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm gonna abstain. Just not more information.
Is that Member Ochoa?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and the last item under new data elements is to consider adding a data element if the person is stopped as a member of the local jurisdiction. Is there a motion for number 3?
I'll make a motion for that. Edgar Hampton.
Second, Ayub.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Commissioner Ray opposes based on data, whether there, unless there's some exemption for the state of California in our role.
I think I would think that's a possible amendment if you're interested in making that amendment, Commissioner Ray.
Yes, I would, amendment sounds good. I'm okay with that.
Member Hampton, you agreeable with that amendment?
Yes, sir, that's fine. I understand why.
Okay. Sheriff Ayub?
Yeah, yes, I agree.
All right. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I would caution us in starting down a path where we are treating different law enforcement agencies differently here in the collection of this data. So I'm going to oppose because it's this is messy and it's not adequately addressing the concerns raised.
Yeah, this is Brendan. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to collect, for CHP to collect that data also, if it's possible or not. So I went from my vote may have changed slightly. I just don't understand. Because CHP officers are jurisdictional, right?
We are jurisdictional, but I think the issue that I have is just the fact that there's people so transitory that we contact the majority of the people, especially on the freeway. And I just think that it's going to skew the data and the data that we're going to be collecting, and it's going to require them to spend a lot of time asking questions that or deducing information that may be inaccurate, because a person may just be going across the freeway, but they may have an address that's somewhere, people that work and live in California and travel. I'm trying to look at the value that we would get from the gleaning from that data and how accurate it would be based off of just going from a license, because that's really what we would have to go from. Because for instance, there's several people who work in Sacramento, but they all live in the Bay Area, or they live somewhere else. So if we stop them here, where are we going to put them? Which communities?
I would think that the benchmarking of these. I'm not sure why I had an echo with this system, but the benchmarking of data is different for CHP. It has different relevance, I would think, than a local jurisdiction, a local municipality. That's where I see a difference. I understand we don't want to create a separate set of rules. I see that as a different data value in the analysis side.
So I just think this is, like the last point, the last vote. I think this is something that warrants further consideration if we're trying to get at like how to better benchmark. I'm not sure this is the way to do it, and I think that this is also moving us away from perception data to actual data. So I think this is a worthwhile topic to consider more deeply.
Any other discussion?
Oh, I thought we were continuing with the vote. I know.
Right. That's where I was going. If there was not additional discussion, I was going to go ahead with the roll call vote.
Member Raphael, I see the intent and I see the value of the data, but I think we should think about it a little bit more, perhaps next year, and I'm going to vote nay.
Melanie Ochoa, nay, for the same reason.
Brendan Woods, nay.
Hampton, aye.
Member Kajavi, nay, for the same reason. This could be a topic of future discussion, though.
Member Kulkarni, nay, also have continued concerns and would like further conversation.
Member Vane, nay.
No, for more conversation.
Member Kennedy, did you vote on the previous one? I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to be included in that.
I believe when I was ready to vote, it was already,
Okay, as long as you had a chance. I just want to make sure you had a chance.
thank you.
I haven't been keeping track of the nays, but it seems that the nays are overwhelming on this. I will vote in support.
Okay. Yes, Chief Swing, they are, but we need to go through everyone, please.
Okay.
Sheriff?
I made the second. I'm an aye.
Okay. Commissioner Ray?
I would only be an aye with an amendment. So,
That's it. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 no votes and 5 yes votes. The motion doesn't carry.
Tanya Koshi, are there additional items below this? I don't recall what was underneath that. Okay,
Yes, there
remove.
is one more, and I voted the one where I think we landed, or the board landed on a proposal, but I'm not totally positive that's what they wanted.
Okay. So we'll, is there a motion? I'll move item 9, removing proposals to add race of officer and gender of officer. Make a motion, support that.
I say
Yeah. And by carve out, we mean that DOJ will not release that data to the public in the event that it's going to compromise someone's confidentiality or identity.
Just to be clear, if this is based on my proposal, because it has all 3 names present, it was not that they would not release it, is that they would release it for purposes of, I forget the terms that you use, like scholarly, journalistic, political, or government purpose, and not be released where the individual information will not be released.
Well, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear the motion. I want to make sure I got it correct.
Motion is to consider moving proposals to add race of officer and gender of officer. I am not, my understanding of 6254 that it's not an exemption of release of information under 6254. I would have to hear that from public records professional to understand if it is able to be exempted. Because I know there's other legislation that's passed recently that requires the Department of Justice to release third-party information. That happened after SB 1421. So I don't have confidence that it would not be released otherwise, or wouldn't be subject to being released otherwise, if compelled.
And also, just to be clear, this proposal was with respect to all data, not just the officer identifiable data. It's for any personally identifiable information that's in. So I think that might be a separate thing to vote on, whether or not we think the regulation should explicitly allow for the release of data for those purposes, because right now the DOJ is not releasing it at all.
So there's a motion and a second to remove or to not support item number 9. Any other discussion on that?
Can I just add a point of information that there are jurisdictions, for example, in Boston, a study was done looking at race of officer and race of, for example, the driver was stopped, and I don't want to see us lose the opportunity to also better understand policing in California. So I think having DOJ's proposal to add these categories, race and gender of officers, is critical. We don't want to lose the opportunity to have the data to begin with.
I think this is an important topic. We're talking about the potential officer privacy. I think it's worthy of deeper conversation, and I think a topic that can be brought up later for the board to discuss at a different time.
I would support that if that's a motion.
Yes. That's the motion is to eliminate number 9, or to remove. Consider moving proposals. That's like a double, not sure. So to remove the addition of race of officer and gender of officer is the intent of the motion.
Are we considering 9 and A separately, Chief Swing?
If we no longer collect the data, then I don't know that A is relevant. Or if we don't collect the data to begin with, then I don't know that A is relevant.
And like as I said, my proposal generally, which I don't see captured elsewhere, should be a standalone recommendation to the DOJ about release.
Okay, there's a motion right now for 9, so why don't we go ahead and vote on that, and then we can entertain the additional motion that is not captured.
Brendan Woods, nay.
Melanie Ochoa, nay.
Hampton, aye.
Andrea Guerrero, nay.
Steve Raphael.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Steve Raphael, nay.
Manjushak Kulkarni, nay.
I'm not sure you got mine, but Member Bain, nay.
Lily Kajavi, nay.
David Swing, aye.
Bill Ayub, aye.
Any abstentions? Nancy, Benonati, there are votes you don't have that you need?
I'm trying to confirm that right now. I'm sorry, I do have to go through it one more time, just so I have Member Kajabi, no. Member Vang, no. Member Swing, aye. Member Ayub, aye. Member Ray, aye. Member Guerrero, no. Member Raphael, no. Member Ochoa, no. Member Woods, no. Member Kennedy, I do not have your vote. Sorry.
And I don't think you mentioned my name, Kulkarni, no.
Member Kennedy, are you still on the line?
I am still on the line. I'm torn because I think the information is valuable. And we got to figure out how we can capture that data. That is important data.
You can abstain.
All right. Okay, I'll
And then I have Member Hampton, aye. One, two.
The motion fails.
The motion fails, yes. We have seven noes, 1 abstention, and
We have
4 ayes.
We have 8 minutes until the meeting begins at 6 p.m. Although, Member Ochoa, I don't know what was not captured in that time. I don't know that we have the time to
Well, the one thing that I see does not look to be captured at all in anything that we voted on, and I don't know if that's, did we vote on excluding transit sweeps? Because I know multiple people commented on that, and make sure that we comment on whether or not we should be excluding transit sweeps from data collection.
Can I ask one other, just with regards to our last vote, should we have a separate vote on the proposal to have a carve out in terms of releasing the data for research purposes only, with the aim of protecting confidentiality?
There is one built into the regulations currently, and it's being proposed. It is proposed to be revised to make it even a little bit more broad at this point.
And that's pertaining specifically to the race and gender fields for officers?
No, that it applies. No, it is not specifically for the race and gender. It is for those fields which the DOJ has not released, and it allows researchers to have those fields. In the regulations, there's a portion that talks about if an officer or an individual can be re-identified, then it does not need to be produced pursuant to the Public Records Act. And so that provision that I was talking about for researchers, if they apply, and we are actually working on that as well to come up with a more clear standard as to when researchers would be able to apply and how they would be able to apply. It's currently in there now, but we're trying to make it a little bit more broad so that the data can be used for public policy. And those changes are reflected in the proposed regulations at the end of the document.
Raphael, are you okay with that?
Maybe if we could add to the affirmations above, affirm and support DOJ's change to regs to ensure confidentiality of stopped persons and officers involved.
Okay.
So just as the flag is like a point of information on that from the side of entity actually requesting this information, and I think Nancy is speaking to this, they're trying to find ways to make sure that it can be released. Right now, they're completely withholding it, or they had been previously. So I think my proposed solution was to kind of track the existing CPRA language to ensure that it's clear that it can be released as long as it's done for these specific purposes, where I think there might be a little bit of still ambiguity that's maybe present in the existing language. Because I know there's ongoing concerns about various forms of confidential information being still included by officers into the produced data.
So let's look at number 10. We have less than 4 minutes to do this and also talk about some pending items before the meeting at 6 o'clock. This is I don't know if we're going to get to this one, candidly. I don't know if we have time because it's going to involve, I'm sure, more conversation than 4 minutes will allow based on our prior conversations.
Well, I'll just go ahead and just move to vote on that proposal 10.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second.
Brendan Wood, second. Sorry.
Oh. Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion?
I think this is an important topic and we should take it up, but I think I'm going to vote nay and believe this should be a topic of conversation for the coming year.
Edgar Hampton, I also vote nay for that same reason, since the concern for the previous motions was not enough discussion on it.
Commissioner Ray, I vote no.
I don't know if I need to vote on my own motion, but Melanie Ochoa, I vote yay, because this is represents a change. So I think if there's discussion, it should be done before the change is made.
Member Ayub, how do you vote?
I vote nay.
Member Swing?
Vote nay. I think it requires and needs the input from our transit officers or agencies, and I understand the impact this would have.
Member Carney, how do you vote?
I vote yay.
Member Cha Bang? Sorry, it's late. I had a concussion over the weekend too, so apologies.
No problem. I vote yay.
Member Kennedy?
Or conversation, so I'll vote no on that.
Member Kajabi?
This is a recommendation for DOJ to consider this and not necessarily final wording, so I'll vote yay.
Member Guerrero?
Yay, for the same reasons.
I missed somebody because you're all really little now because of the.
You need me? Aye. Brendan Woods, aye.
Okay, thank you, Brendan.
I think you need Brian Kennedy.
He voted already.
Okay.
He did,
Okay.
yes.
Great.
1, 2. We have a tie. The motion does not carry. 6-6.
Okay. Nancy, how do you want to handle the discussion about bringing the other items back to the Stop Data Committee?
So I can start. I apologize for bringing this up literally at the last minute of this meeting. We did want to brief the board, and I think Erin Choi here from CGIS as well. But we did learn from doing our reviews on some of the data that the Oakland Police Department and NCHP had correctly collected data, but then when it was being transferred to the DOJ, there was some kind of a glitch and it wasn't being transferred correctly. And so, as we have found, this is, kind of, we've had these discussions around data integrity. And so this is, a way that we did the check and balance. The research center actually, found the errors and said, well, what's going on here? So it doesn't impact a whole lot of the data, but because of the things that are being asked to be included in the report, it would impact the gender analysis. For example, because with regard to the way the CHP's data was being transmitted, it impacted those data values where the officer selected gender nonconforming. And so with the Oakland Police Department issue, it impacted on their consent searches. So with regard to those two areas, we're doing deep dives into consent searches this year and in looking at gender and how that plays out in the STOP data. those two sections of the report are going to have to be rerun. We've already gotten confirmation from the Oakland Police Department that they have resent and they have corrected their data. And the research center will be able to start going back and correcting that. And then I think the CHP is still working on that because they had a larger number, obviously, because of just the volume of stops that they have. But this is, this is good that we found that this now, and these things happen, and so we are working to correct that. Erin can brief you on some more of the specifics if you have any questions. But I think the bottom line is that we're going to have to rerun some of those analyses. Now, it's not going to impact like the larger data sets, but where we get more granular, we just want to make sure that the data is correct. We don't want to put out a report that has, even if it's just a 0.02% difference or whatever it is, we just want to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. And so we just wanted to like bring you up to speed on that. And, we were going to have the subcommittee, the Stop Data Analysis Subcommittee, follow up on that at its next meeting and get like a deeper dive as to what's going on. And then they can report back to the full board at the October board meeting. Erin, I don't know if you're still on the line. And I know Tiffany Jantz is here from the Research Center because it really impacts, they are going to have to, redo a lot of the work that they've already done. And so if you have any questions, or Erin or Tiffany, anything that you would like to add, or anything I got wrong, please step up.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is Erin. One thing I can note is that for both of these data sets, we have received the updated transfers from the agencies last week. So we have received the updated information and it's under review right now. So we do have a clear path forward. I don't want to keep everyone on the line too long, but if you have questions or there's anything else that would be helpful, I'm certainly happy to answer questions, but I think Nancy covered the high points so far.
This is Tiffany from the Research Center. I agree with Nancy's assessment and with Erin's sentiment, and I'm happy to field questions along with my colleague Kevin Walker.
So if there are no immediate questions, is there still an interest for the Stop Data Committee to review the data, or is the board satisfied with the information presented from DOJ?
I would say in the spirit of next steps, especially as the effort's going to roll out across 400 agencies, I think things like this are going to come up. And maybe the Stop Data Subcommittee should think about just the process of ensuring data quality, scanning for outliers, and trying to identify problems and just correct them when they happen. I think that's exactly what you have to do: bring them to the attention of the board and then fix it.
Remember, Raphael, I wasn't sure in that comment if you were recommending that the Stop Data Committee look at the data set, or if we
or perhaps not look at the data set, but discuss the process for uncovering errors and what to do when one's found. Because I don't think this will, this is a big effort. There's lots of agencies, and I'm certain this will happen again.
Sure. I think you're right. That doesn't require a motion, so I think we can, if there are no other comments or additional action items or next steps, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Hearing none. The DOJ staff, thank you for this. The board members, thank you for staying here online for a little bit longer than we had planned. And DOJ staff, good luck tonight on public comment. Thank you for your help. Meeting adjourned.
Good night.